For centuries, the figure of the devil has captivated and terrified us in, pretty much equal measure. He's the ultimate villain, right? The source of all evil. But what if I told you the story is way more complex and, frankly, a lot more fascinating than you think? Let's deconstruct the devil. This one line, this single line from John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost, has had such a profound impact on our modern image of Satan. It just perfectly paints this picture of a rebellious, prideful, almost charismatic anti-hero. It's an idea that has been bouncing around our culture for hundreds of years.
And those are really the crucial questions, aren't they? Because to actually understand this figure, we have to peel back all these layers of folklore and theology and even moral panic. So let's start with the version we all think we know.
All right, first up, the devil you know, the one from pop culture. This is the devil of crossroads deals and fiery pitchforks, a character so deep in our culture that he feels like he's always been there. But as you're about to see, that's not the case at all.
What's so wild is that this image is basically a mashup of a bunch of different ideas. The horns and the cloven hooves, yeah, those were probably borrowed from pagan gods like Pan. The pitchfork, that's from Poseidon's trident. But the idea that has really stuck around is the deal maker, immortalized in legends, like Robert Johnson supposedly selling his soul for guitar skills, and of course, in the classic story of the Faustian bargain. At its core, it's all about this huge trade-off, your immortal soul for whatever you want on Earth. And get this, according to tradition, these pacts could be spoken or even written out in your own blood. This idea of a literal contract with a demon just became this incredibly powerful story, and it's still a huge part of how we see the devil today.
And this is where things get really, really interesting. Because if you go back to the original religious texts, the character you find there is almost unrecognizable.
Yeah, before he was the king of hell, the devil had a completely different job description, and he worked for a very different boss. This is just an incredible transformation. In the Hebrew Bible, Hasatan isn't even a name. It's a job title. It means the adversary or the accuser. This guy is part of God's heavenly court, kind of like a divine prosecutor. Think about the book of Job. Hasatan's whole gig is to test Job's faith, but, and this is the key, he does it with God's permission. He's an employee, not a rival. It was only much later that this character evolved into a proper name, Satan, the fallen angel, the cosmic bad guy in a war against God.
So how did that happen? How do you go from heavenly prosecutor to the ultimate enemy? Well, a major influence was Zoroastrianism, this ancient Persian religion. They had this idea of Engram Mainyu, a spirit of pure evil locked in a forever war with a god of light. That powerful idea of cosmic conflict really shaped later Jewish and Christian thought, turning the accuser into the literal embodiment of evil.
And what about Lucifer? Oh man, this is one of the biggest mix-ups out there. The word Lucifer just means light bringer in Latin. It was used in the book of Isaiah as a metaphor for a fallen king of Babylon. It had absolutely nothing to do with a fallen angel. But later on, church fathers reinterpreted the passage, and suddenly, Lucifer became the go-to name for Satan before we got kicked out of heaven. So, this really complicated history leads us straight into an equally complicated present. When we hear the word Satanism, we usually think of one thing, but the reality is a whole spectrum of completely different beliefs. This is such an important question because the answers just totally fly in the face of our pop culture ideas of what a Satanist is. In fact, a lot of them don't even believe Satan is real. We can basically break it down into three different camps. On one end, you have atheistic Satanism, like the Church of Satan. For them, Satan isn't a god you worship. He's a powerful symbol of individualism and rebellion. Then you have theistic Satanists who do see Satan as a literal deity to be revered. And then there's Luciferianism, which often sees Lucifer not as Satan, but as a light bringer, a symbol for the search for knowledge. Three totally different paths, all under one very misunderstood banner.
Now, this misunderstanding hit a terrifying peak in the late 20th century. It created this massive social storm that was built completely on fear, not on facts.
Just look at that number, over 12,000. That's how many unsubstantiated cases of so-called satanic ritual abuse were alleged during the 80s and 90s. And this wasn't some fringe theory. This was on the nightly news. It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon.
So how did this fire even start? Well, it really kicked off in 1980 with this now discredited book called Michelle Remembers, which was all about recovering memories of abuse. That lit the match. Then in '83, you have the infamous McMartin preschool trial. It was a 7-year-long spectacle that ended with no convictions, but put the idea into everyone's head. By 1987, it was primetime TV, with Geraldo Rivera claiming a secret network of over 1 million Satanists was operating in the U.S.
And here's the bottom line. After all that hysteria, after extensive investigations by law enforcement, including the FBI, the central claim of the panic, this idea of a vast, organized, underground satanic cult, was found to be completely baseless. There was no evidence. It was, for all intents and purposes, a modern-day witch hunt.
But the damage was absolutely real, and we're still feeling the echoes today. Innocent people had their lives completely destroyed. It was a huge warning about the dangers of false memories and suggestive therapy. And maybe the most chilling part? The core ideas of the panic, secret evil cabals, child abuse, weird rituals, have been directly recycled into modern conspiracy theories like QAnon.
Okay, now it is absolutely critical that we distinguish between the myth of the satanic panic and the very real danger posed by certain extremist groups that use this kind of imagery as a cover. The satanic panic had society chasing a phantom threat, right? But that, unfortunately, kind of obscured the actual threat from specific, politically motivated terrorist networks that wrap themselves in satanic imagery to push a violent agenda. One of the most prominent examples is the Order of Nine Angles, or ONA. We're not talking about a church or just a belief system here. Counterterrorism organizations describe it as a decentralized terrorist network that blends Satanism with a violent neo-Nazi ideology. Looking at their core beliefs is, well, it's chilling. The ONA's own writings openly encourage members to commit crimes and political violence to overthrow Western society. And this fusion with Nazism is key. They praise Nazi Germany because they see it as a practical expression of the satanic spirit, a force strong enough to smash the existing order and create chaos, which is their actual goal.
And this isn't just theory. The ONA's ideology has had a direct documented influence on violent neo-Nazi terrorist groups, including National Action in the UK and the Atomwaffen Division in the United States. This is where the appropriation of these ideas becomes a tangible, real-world threat.
So, we're left with this question. We've seen the devil as a heavenly prosecutor, a folkloric trickster, a symbol of rebellion, and even a mask for political terror. Is he a literal being, a philosophical principle, or is he simply a dark reflection of what we fear most in ourselves and in our society? Whatever the answer is, the devil remains one of humanity's most potent and most revealing creations.